The summer of 2025 reignited trade tensions between Canada and the United States, sending shockwaves through both economies and raising fears of a prolonged economic standoff. What began as simmering disagreements over trade balances and market access quickly escalated into a full-blown confrontation. The spark was President Trump's announcement of a sweeping 35% tariff on all Canadian goods, a move that stunned markets and caught many by surprise. The White House framed it as a necessary step to protect American jobs and industries, but the implications were far-reaching. The new tariffs, which also escalated earlier steel and aluminum duties to a punishing 50%, marked a bold declaration of economic warfare. The administration's goal was clear: force Canadian concessions at the negotiating table, even if it meant risking a major disruption to North American trade. For Canada, the echoes of the 2018 trade dispute were unmistakable. Memories of that turbulent period resurfaced, but this time, Ottawa responded with unprecedented speed and resolve, determined to avoid the mistakes of the past. Prime Minister Mark Carney and Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland acted decisively, rallying their cabinet and reaching out to business leaders. They were determined not to let Canada's economic interests be trampled by external pressure. Almost overnight, cross-border truck traffic ground to a halt, exposing the fragility of supply chains built on decades of free trade. Factories on both sides of the border faced sudden shortages, and consumers braced for price hikes. The Canadian government, having learned from past crises, knew passivity was not an option. They convened emergency meetings, weighing every possible response. Their strategy was not just about retaliation, it was about reshaping the economic landscape to protect Canada's sovereignty and ensure long-term stability. Ottawa sought to turn adversity into an opportunity for renewal. The impact was immediate. Steel and aluminum flows choked, and businesses scrambled to adapt. Small manufacturers and exporters faced tough choices as uncertainty loomed. Ottawa's response aimed to insulate the economy from future shocks and accelerate a shift toward a greener, more resilient industrial base. Investments in clean technology and domestic manufacturing were fast-tracked. In crisis, Canada saw an opportunity for transformation, one that could redefine its economic future for generations to come. In response to mounting trade tensions, Canada's counterstrike was a sophisticated tariff rate quota system, designed to both protect domestic industries and send a strong message to its southern neighbor. This system specifically targeted U.S. steel and aluminum, two sectors at the heart of the cross-border trade dispute. Imports were capped at $15.60 billion, about two-thirds of previous trade, signaling the end of unlimited U.S. access and marking a dramatic shift in the rules of engagement. Within the quota, a 25% tariff applied, making even allowed imports more expensive and less attractive for U.S. exporters. Above the quota, a punishing 50% rate made excess imports virtually unviable, effectively slamming the door on any attempts to flood the Canadian market. Finance Minister Freeland made it clear, these measures were not temporary, nor were they a bargaining chip to be traded away in future negotiations. Canadian smelters and steel mills ramped up production, ready to fill the gap left by U.S. suppliers and keep the country's manufacturing sector humming. Labor unions, industry and government formed a united front, working together to ensure job security, stable orders, and a future for Canadian workers in these vital sectors. The policy was a direct result of hard lessons learned from 2018. Fragmentation was out, unity and coordinated action were now the guiding principles. Canada's industrial heartland from Ontario to the prairies was now firmly defended by a new wall of tariffs and quotas. The new trade regime sent a clear and unmistakable message: Canada would stand strong to protect its industries, its workers, and its economic future. The trade war's impact was immediate and personal for workers and businesses. Canadian steel and aluminum workers found new job security, while unions hailed the government's decisive action. For U.S. companies like Alcoa and Rio Tinto, the tariffs meant hundreds of millions in new costs, lost profits, and canceled investments. The auto sector, reliant on cross-border parts, faced steep new expenses, $360 more per ton of steel, threatening supply chains. To prevent stockpiling, Canada structured tariffs in 3-month increments, forcing rapid adaptation. Beverage can aluminum was partially exempted, but other U.S. producers faced a tax shock, giving Quebec's low-carbon foundries a new edge. The tariffs forced a painful realignment of North American supply chains. Canada's tariffs weren't just retaliation. They marked a turning point in the nation's industrial strategy, signaling a bold new direction for the country's economic future. Instead, they became a springboard for a green industrial revolution, pushing Canadian industries to innovate and adapt to a rapidly changing world. The protected market allowed low-carbon Canadian metals to thrive, supported by over $2 billion in government investment, funding that accelerated the shift to cleaner, more sustainable production. Major projects included converting traditional blast furnaces to state-of-the-art electric arc furnaces, and integrating clean hydrogen into the process, slashing emissions, cutting energy costs, and boosting global competitiveness for Canadian producers. Quebec's hydro-powered aluminium became a strategic asset, producing some of the world's lowest carbon metal and attracting international buyers seeking greener materials. A new PTX plant aimed to cut steel's carbon footprint dramatically, creating a premium product for eco-conscious buyers and setting a new standard for the industry. The ultimate goal: win in Europe, where the EU's carbon border adjustment mechanism rewards low-carbon imports and penalizes polluters, opening new markets for Canadian exports. Canada's green metals could soon enjoy a Euro 100/ton advantage over dirtier competitors, making them more attractive to buyers and driving further investment in clean technology. What began as a trade war ultimately became a launchpad for Canada's global green ambitions, reshaping its role in the world economy and setting a powerful example for others to follow. A key pillar of Canada's new trade policy was closing loopholes exploited by Chinese producers. For years, semi-finished Chinese metals entered Canada via the US or Mexico, undermining domestic industry. Ottawa responded with a blockchain tracking system, creating a tamper-proof record of every shipment's origin. Chemical isotope testing further exposed disguised Chinese metals, providing irrefutable proof of origin. These tools are expected to cut cleansed Chinese imports by 70%, a major win for Canadian producers. Canada's enforcement set a new global standard, protecting its market and ensuring fair play. The era of backdoor imports was over. The tariffs rippled across North America, hitting industries from autos to food packaging. Automakers faced broken supply chains and higher costs, threatening profits and pushing up car prices. The transition to electric vehicles became even more complex and expensive. U.S. food and beverage companies, hit by higher aluminium costs, lost ground to Canadian competitors. Quebec's low-carbon aluminium foundries gained new market share. Construction projects in cities like Vancouver faced rising costs for American steel, risking delays and overruns. Ottawa considered a $500 million annual subsidy to cushion critical infrastructure from tariff shocks. The government balanced industrial protection with support for vulnerable sectors. Canada's response was more than retaliation. It was a blueprint for a resilient green economy. The summer of 2025 marked a shift from dependence on U.S. trade to self-sufficiency and sustainability. Canada's vision: become a global leader in green metals, leveraging clean energy and strategic investment. Tariffs gave domestic industries room to grow, innovate, and compete globally. The era of automatic free trade was over. Managed trade and national interests now shaped policy. Canadian industries were pushed to diversify, with Europe's green market as a key target. The path ahead is challenging, but Canada has chosen transformation over complacency. This is a fight for Canada's place in a changing world, where economic strength and environmental leadership go hand in hand.